Welcome to Real Money, Real Life, the podcast where we get real about money and the messy human stuff that comes with it. I'm Linda Grizely, financial wellness speaker, personal finance educator, and creator of the Me Money Method. This is the show for people who feel behind financially and want to finally understand money and make confident decisions that work in their real life. Because money isn't just math, it's life, and you deserve to feel confident with money and good about how you spend it. Hello, everyone. If you're listening, you're one of the real ones, the ones who want retirement to feel less like a mystery and more like a well-written script. Today, we're focusing on retirement planning. It can feel technical, intimidating, and disconnected from real life, but we're going to explore how pop culture, from classic rock to iconic TV moments, can make complex financial concepts easier to understand and apply. Through relatable references, we're going to unpack retirement readiness, emotional uncertainty, the transition from saving to spending, and how to tune out financial noise so you can move forward with clarity and confidence. My guest today is Jesse Hurst, a senior wealth manager and CEO of Impel Wealth Management, where he brings more than 3 decades of financial planning experience to the families and individuals he serves. A fellow certified financial planner professional and accredited investment fiduciary, Jesse has earned a reputation for translating complex retirement and investment strategies into clear, actionable guidance. Jesse's mission is simple: to help clients move life forward with a deep understanding of retirement planning, estate strategies, long-term wealth management, and he combines technical expertise with a genuine commitment to meaningful client relationships. And at Impel, Jesse and his team prioritize honest conversations and custom planning that reflect each client's unique goals and values. Welcome, Jesse.
Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
Of course. All right. Well, let's start with this. Pop culture, right? So 30 years in planning, and how did you get into explaining it through pop culture?
Well, I love music, right? And I'm pretty well versed on music, probably from the 40s and 50s up through, I would say, really well through the 90s. Less so the last maybe 10 or 15 years as I've gotten older, right? You know, you love what you love and you listen to it over and over again. But then for whatever reason, throughout my whole life, TV shows, movies, Broadway shows, cartoons, right? Certain things just stick with me, right? And I'll hear somebody, bring up a topic or a point, and it immediately triggers a thought or analogy to some movie reference or TV reference or a classic rock song or whatever. And so I started writing blog posts, right? We used to call them, our weekly newsletters, right? Probably back in 2010, 2011. And at that time, I was part of a firm that had 3 partners. So we took turns writing. So I'd write 1 or 2 a month. And then in 2017, I formed Impel Wealth Management, and I was the lead person. So then I was writing every week. And then when COVID hit, I doubled down and started writing 2 a week because you couldn't be face-to-face with people and you wanted to help fill some of the informational void and so forth. And so, years ago, I used to, like, every once in a while, relate something that I thought sounded funny or sounded interesting or I thought would make it more relatable to people through some pop culture lens. And I usually got good feedback on it. But as we talk here, I'll share with kind of a couple of things that happened in the early parts of COVID that really kind of solidified it for me and made me realize that is really a trigger point that causes people to go, oh, now I understand, or now it's interesting to the point that I want to read that. It's not just charts, graphs, numbers, that type of thing.
Right. Yeah. So a lot of the work that I do talks about the human side of money and the behavioral side, and it's very much about who you are as a person. I don't talk about necessarily pop culture and relating it that way, but I love that because it is something that people can relate to more than they can relate to numbers and spreadsheets and software, right? So give us an example of some of the ones that you used, or maybe what was the first one that got you started?
Yeah, so I can't remember some of the early references because it was just kind of a hit or miss once in a while thing. The first one that really stuck with me was in late March of 2020, in the early days of COVID, right? The economy was shut down, stock market's down 34% in 6 weeks. And Steve Mnuchin, who was the Treasury Secretary at the time, and Jay Powell, who was the Federal Reserve Bank Chairman at the time, did a joint press conference, and they said this is an unconventional recession. We're going to have to fight it using unconventional weapons. And at that point, the Federal Reserve Bank was cutting interest rates to zero, opening up the floodgates of liquidity. And at the same time, the government was passing the CARES Act with all the stimulus checks and PPP loans and enhanced unemployment benefits. And the first thing that popped into my head was the scene in Animal House where they all get kicked out of the fraternity and they decide they're going to go get Dean Wormer. And they said, now we could fight them using conventional weapons, but that could take years and cost millions of lives. And I thought, oh my gosh, they just said we're going to fight this recession using unconventional weapons. So I wrote a blog post comparing the actions of the federal government to the actions of the frat brothers in Animal House. And my wife, who edits everything that I write, was like, you can't really do that, can you? And I'm like, oh no, it's funny. It'll be, and people loved it, right? We got so much response from it. And so it was about 6 months later that I saw a report that showed that the US economy at the end of 2019 was $21.7 trillion GDP. And by June 30th of 2020, after the COVID shutdowns and so forth, the US economy had shrunk to $19.5 trillion. And I was sitting there thinking about it going, that means that the COVID shutdowns dug a $2.2 trillion hole in the US economy. And the first thing that popped into my head was the Friends episode where Joey and Monica and Chandler are out at the beach and Joey digs a big hole and the waves come in and fill the hole. And you remember how all the Friends episodes are titled The One Where, right? Yeah. So I wrote a blog post titled The One Where Joey and the Economy Dug a Hole. And I said, right, the COVID shutdowns dug a $2.2 trillion hole in the economy, just like Joey dug a hole at the beach. And just like the waves came rushing in to fill Joey's hole at the beach, the US government, the federal government rushed in and the Federal Reserve Bank rushed in with $6 trillion of fiscal and monetary stimulus. And they stuffed $6 trillion of stimulus into a $2 trillion hole. Maybe we might have some unintended consequences from that. Maybe it might cause inflation. Maybe it might cause some irregularities with consumer spending patterns and behaviors around employment and stuff. But people got it, right? People went, oh, I remember that episode. And they went, even if I don't really understand the CARES Act and all the stimulus stuff, and I don't really understand all the facilities of the Federal Reserve Bank, because of the Friends episode reference, they read it and they remembered it.
I love it. Yeah. And it makes it so much more understandable because you're picturing that hole in your head and you're picturing the sand coming in and then you're picturing a hole of money and then the money coming in, right? And then where's that money coming from? And you're right, like what's going to happen over there now? So that's great. I love those analogies. I think one of my favorite ones that you have is the Bohemian Rhapsody for retirement, because I always explain retirement as like you spend your whole life building this mountain of money, you're climbing the mountain, then all of a sudden you're at the top and you have to completely shift your mindset from climbing a mountain and saving to getting down the mountain safely, like rappelling down and making sure you don't run out of money. And it's this whole different world.
Yep.
And so the Bohemian Rhapsody reference you have, I think, is this real life or is it fantasy? Like what is happening? Tell us more about that one.
Yeah, so it's really interesting. I live in Northeast Ohio, Midwest, Rust Belt mentality, a lot of millionaire next door type clients, right? And those are clients who over time and through good habits, you kind of talked about it as the accumulation and then rappelling down the other side. I talk about it in terms of if your financial life is out there in two broad brushstrokes, the accumulation phase and then the distribution phase. Once you cross that summit from working life to retirement life, the very habits that cause people to be successful in the accumulation phase of life, right? No matter what I make, I spend less than what I make. I put money into my 401k and my Roth IRA every year. I pay down debt. I pay off my mortgage. I don't make crazy buying decisions based on credit. I don't make crazy investing decisions based on tips that I got at the barbershop or the golf course or, online chat rooms or whatever. And the cumulative effect of good habits over time is that people inevitably build wealth. Now, I think we can enhance that through our services, through our advice, and so forth. But you can't outplan bad habits, right? If people have the good foundational habits, they're going to be successful. So you get clients who build asset bases, million, $2 million, $3 million of resources. And for us, success in retirement is always about, do you have the cash flow to do the things you want to do that make life meaningful for you during those retirement years, right? And you look at the income resources that would come from Social Security or government pensions, or for a select few that still have defined benefit pension plans out there and so forth. So you've got those income resources, and then you've got the asset resources. Well, a lot of people have a hard time flipping that switch when they go from accumulation phase over to distribution phase. It's like, I built this mountain doing these things, and if I change these habits, I might not have those resources anymore, right? And so it is a coaching process so we meet with our clients every 6 months like clockwork. Like, we literally, when clients leave our office, we book their next 6-month meeting. I had a client say to me not long ago, they said, "Hey, this is just like going to the dentist's office, except the dentist gives me Novocaine," right? Like, right. So, so
sometimes they need they wish I could give them Novocaine, right?
Right. So, but it is an ongoing coaching process to help people understand that, no, this is real life. It's not fantasy. This is real life. We've accumulated these resources. And, most people have heard about the 4% withdrawal rule, right? The Bill Benjen stuff from years ago. And so you look at it and you go, I'll give you a great example. I have a couple that are clients of mine in their late 60s now. They've been clients of mine since 1991. All right. When they first became clients of mine, they didn't have children. And, now they've got children and grandchildren and so forth. They've been with me for 35 years. And they have both their Social Securities, and he has an old BF Goodrich pension, right? And between both their Social Securities and pensions, they bring in about $6,500 a month, about $78,000 a year. They have $2.5 million of investment assets with me, right? $2.5 million at 4% is $100,000 a year. They could live on $180,000 a year, and it has taken me years of getting them to understand, giving themselves permission to spend in retirement, that it's okay up to a certain level, 4%, whatever that number is, right? That up to that level, I'm not going to question it, right? Just go spend it. This is what we built this for. This is for you to go and enjoy life. And Barb, the wife, said to me last time when they were in, she goes, "Jesse, I want you to know, we finally listened to you. We're taking a 3-week trip to Australia and New Zealand, and we bought first class plane fare," right? It was like $23,000 or whatever. And I said, "What made you do that?" They said, we kept hearing you tell us over and over and over that it was okay, that this was real life. It wasn't fantasy. It was really okay for us to do that. And then this was the great comment that I got from her. She said, "I finally came to the realization that if Tim and I don't use this money to buy first class plane tickets, eventually our children and grandchildren will."
Oh, good one. Yeah.
Right. And it was kind of like that was the magic moment for her. It finally got there, and they're fine, right? They've got plenty of money. I'll never get them to be able to spend all the money that they have, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so also talking about retirement, I think you've described it as a 12-piece puzzle.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Yeah. So the book I wrote, Poponomics, and that's just the phrase I coined, like using pop culture references to describe economic and investment and retirement planning processes and thought process. In the book, I outlined the 12 chapters as the 12 puzzle pieces that everybody needs to be able to put together to create their own unique puzzle, right? Because everybody's situation is different. Everybody everybody has different resources, different income resources, asset resources, different family situations and goals. So everybody's picture on the box is going to look different. And it's funny, when I started using this analogy with clients, I would ask them, I'm like, think back to when you were a kid putting together a puzzle, or when you were putting together puzzles with your kids or grandkids. I said, what's the first thing you would do? And it's funny, people get really animated about this. They are like, oh, well, you got to turn all the pieces over so you can see the pictures. And then you've got to separate out all the edge pieces, and you got to find the 4 corner pieces. And I'm like, if I was doing a puzzle, the first thing I'd do is look at the picture on the box, right? Because I want to know what I want to solve for, right?
Yeah.
This is what, and if they haven't created that unique retirement vision for themselves, that's one of the first things that we have to do in helping them. You can't solve a 12-piece puzzle if you don't know what the outcome is that you're trying to strive for.
Right. Because you're always looking back at the picture. But once you get the edge pieces and, you start putting together, maybe you pick a middle color or something and you're putting all that color together, but you're still looking back at the picture to see if you're on the right track. Right. So you have to have that vision.
Yeah. And the other thing that I always tell people, from the puzzle analogy or where to start analogy, the other story that I used in the beginning part of the book was, and if you travel a fair amount, you'll get this, right? If you're traveling and you have to make a connecting flight through Chicago or Atlanta or Dallas or Houston or Denver, right? You get off the plane in one of these big airports, and you've got to make your connecting flight. What's the first thing you do? You look for the concourse map, right? And the first thing you do when you find the concourse map is you find the little dot that says you are here. Because if you don't know where you are, you don't know how to get to B37 and get to your connecting flight. So like figuring out where you are today and then creating that picture for where you want to go is what allows us to start, mapping out from point A to point B.
Yeah. Okay, so tell us some more about the pop culture references you have in the book.
Yeah, so for retirement, about getting ready for retirement and trying to figure out where it is you want to go and what are the things you want to do. I use the old song, People Get Ready, right? Like, people get ready, there's a train a-coming, right? It was done back in the 60s, and then Rod Stewart and Jeff Beck redid it in the 80s and so forth. And it's a great song. It's been done by dozens and dozens of people. But you've got to get ready. And there's a lot of pieces to getting ready for retirement. A lot of people think about getting ready for retirement as just a financial exercise. Like, do I have the resources to do what I want to do? But I don't think a lot of people prepare mentally, emotionally for what that transition looks like. I think a lot of people have a hard time picturing what success in retirement looks like for them. Even if you spend 40 hours a week at work plus lunches and getting ready and driving to and from work, right? There's for most people 50 plus hours a week that all of a sudden is going to free up. And if they haven't given serious thought to what the new normal of their schedule is going to look like once they retire, they can wake up day one of retirement and just be like, this is supposed to be awesome, and I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be doing, right? They don't have structure, schedule, socialization, purpose, right? All of these things that really drive happiness in retirement. And I would say a lot of my happiest clients are the most busy in retirement, right? A lot of them, I hear it all the time. I don't know how I found time to work before. And it's not that you want to be overscheduled or overcommitted, but you still want to have some structure and purpose. So one of the things that we do to help people get ready, right, using the song analogy, is we'll give them a calendar, Sunday through Saturday, weekly calendar, 8 a.m. to 10 p.m., right? Just hourly blocks, and just give it to them and say, why don't you start creating the picture of what the new normal of life is going to look like? How much of that is related to health and wellness? How much of it's related to education, reading, learning, lifelong learning type pursuits, volunteerism, health and wellness, family, whatever those things are, but just start getting a picture. Because if you don't, the more people can prepare that way, right? My assumption is, because I believe we're good at what we do, and I don't want that to sound overtly confident or arrogant, but my goal is that if we can help them with the financial resources, then that frees them up so that they can focus on other things they need to get ready for, which is, I always tell people, success in retirement is about having the gift of time, the gift of health, and the gift of resources. And if any one of those changes, retirement life looks different for people.
Yeah. There was a study done once where the response that people had to thinking of their future with self was the same response they had of thinking of a complete stranger. So if you don't start to build that picture of who you are in the future, that person is still a complete stranger to you. So I think you said, if you show up day one of a retirement without any idea of what you're going to do, you're just a complete stranger to yourself.
Yeah.
But when you start planning and looking ahead and saying like, well, how am I going to fill my day? You start to see that person and understand who that person is.
Well, and I think if you take a look at the bulk of our clients, most people who come to us mid-late 40s, early 50s, early mid 50s, and they're trying to figure out, do I have enough fuel in the tank for whatever that eventual successful retirement transition looks like? But then once we've helped them accumulate and be confident they have the resources to make that successful transition from work life to retirement life, most of the time those people remain clients of ours for the rest of their lives. So I have a boatload of clients, the bulk of which are 55 to 85 years old. So I have a lot of clients that came from more traditional families where the husband was working or the primary breadwinner back in, the 70s, 80s, 90s, that type of thing. And some of my clients who've had the hardest time making the transition from work life to retirement life are those who were so tied into their careers. I have a client who was a C-level executive at one of the tire companies here in Akron, and he was there for 42 years. He retired when he was 67 years old, and he had gone for 100 miles an hour for 42 years, and he went from 100 miles an hour to zero, and he had no idea what to do with himself, right? No matter how much we had talked with him. It took probably 2 full years of being retired before he started to kind of get a rhythm of it. And I prefer to have people more prepared for retirement than that, mentally and financially, at that time.
Yeah. I think one of your phrases was retire like a rock star.
Yeah. It's, to me, that's about not so much go out and smash hotel rooms and drink all day, but it's more about like have the confidence in what we have done in preparing for retirement that you can confidently pursue dreams, things that you didn't have time to do when work was taking 40, 50, 60 hours a week of your life. And it's for some people, it's, hey, I bought the car, the dream car I always wanted, and I take it to car shows, right? For some people, it's, hey, I had a client who retired from one of the local utility companies, and he and his wife, they've been clients of mine since 1988. So I started doing this. You were very kind by saying that I've been doing this for more than 30 years. Next year makes 40 years I've been doing this, right? I started in 87, and this couple's been with me since 1988, one of my very first clients. And when he retired in 2018, they literally, and they didn't think they could do this. I talked them into it for the last 2 years of retirement that we have the resources. They rented a house in Tuscany for a month, right? They took off and they did something they never thought they could do. And they said, we don't want to be tourists. We want to see what it's like to live there. So they rented a house in Montepulciano, Italy, and they took day trips to Siena and San Gimignano and Assisi, and they had a ball. And it's interesting. Have you been to Italy? Have you been to Tuscany before?
I have not.
Okay, so in the Bible, it talks about like a city built on a hill. Well, that's how towns protected themselves in the old times, right? Being up on a hill and being able to see your enemy coming. But literally in Tuscany, every city's built on a hill, which means you've got old cobblestone roads and you've got hills and steps and that kind of stuff. The interesting thing is they were talking with me last year and they're like, we're really glad we did that when we did, because 8 years later, we don't know if, from a health standpoint, if our knees, our arthritis, our hip, we don't know if we could walk and do the things we did at 75 that we did when we were 67, right? So, and that's one of the other things that I think is really important to help clients realize is that there's always this tension between, I want to do things while I'm young enough and healthy enough to enjoy it, but I don't want to spend so much that I don't have enough if I live longer, right? It's always that I want to spend now, but I don't want to run out later. And trying to balance that tension with clients is always a big deal.
Yeah, that's definitely a balance. Do you have a pop culture reference for that one?
I do not. And I was trying to think of, it's kind of probably like it's the first one that would pop into my mind. There was a song from the English Beat back in the early 80s called Save It for Later, right? It's Pete Townsend redid it and Eddie Vedder redid it. It's a great song. If you don't remember it, go look it up. But it's like, I had a client, and I think I tell this story in the book. I had a client who was referred to me in the early 90s. And we got to remember, in the early 90s, interest rates were a lot higher and stuff. But this was a widow who was living on Social Security, and she had $400,000 split between 4 different banks. Remember, at that time, FDIC insurance limits were $100,000 per bank. And she had $400,000 sitting in 4 different banks because she wanted to be diversified, and 2 of the accounts were non-interest bearing, right? And you just said, oh. So we helped her reshuffle stuff and so forth. And you sit there and you go, okay, $400,000 now earning, about 5% a year is $20,000 a year of interest income. And it's like, Beth, what are we going to use this money for? What would you like to do? And she was 78 years old, and I'll never forget this. She looked at me after we talked about it for a while. She goes, Jesse, you don't understand. I can't spend that money. I'm like, Beth, why not? And she goes, what happens if I need that more later when I'm old? And I'm like, Beth, you're 78, right? And Beth died at 83 years old, and she never spent a dime of it. I couldn't get her there, right? And it's part of what my mission became was, I can do everything I'm supposed to do to help clients create financial resources and prosperity and wealth and so forth. But if it doesn't change their life, we kind of failed, right? Yeah. I had the conversation with a client the other day who's got about $3 million of investment assets with us, and they're in their early 60s. They just retired. And I said, hey, look, if we get 10 years down the road and your $3 million is $4.8 million, and you look back 10 years from now and go, I wish we would have done this, I wish we would have done that, we failed, right? I'd much rather see your $3 million be $3.8 million and have you guys go, we did everything we wanted to do, we had a blast, right?
Yeah. Okay, back to the pop culture references. Are there any that you find yourself using over and over and over again? Like the key ones in maybe new client intakes or just annual reviews?
I think for me, it's kind of always evolving, right? Like, I don't know whether you have ever heard of an economist by the name of Ed Yardeni, Yardeni Research. He came out with something recently titled The G-Shaped Economy. It's about the generational economy, how like baby boomers are retiring and they have like $89 trillion of net worth, but they're no longer showing up in the labor income statistics because they're not working for income, but they still have assets and they're spending, and they're not only spending on their retirement lifestyle, but generationally, they're helping their kids and grandkids with things like college,
Mm-hmm.
travel and lifestyle, buying a first house, and so forth. And it partially explains, why retail sales have stayed up, why consumer spending has stayed up, even when consumer confidence numbers have fallen and income levels haven't stayed up. And so, but you have to have a baby boomer parent or grandparent who has those resources. So I wrote a blog post a couple of weeks ago called "Are you a fortunate son or daughter?" using the Fortunate Son song from Creedence Clearwater Revival. Right. I saw a report the other day that talked about there's now 242 cities in the United States where the cost of a starter home, this is a report from Zillow, the starting price of a starter home in 242 cities now exceeds $1 million. And how, these young families, these, Gen Z type people just are beside themselves trying to get the down payment. And with mortgage rates at, 6.5%, with property taxes up, utilities up, homeowners insurance rates up, they just don't think they can get there. And I use the old Beatles song "When I Get Home," which came off A Hard Day's Night, to explain it. The whole point of the song was John Lennon wrote the song about being on the road and touring, and I can't wait, when I get home, I'm going to do this. But young kids today can't get home because they can't afford $1 million starter home, right? I wrote a two-piece part recently about behavioral finance and helping people through all the emotional stuff that comes with being a successful investor over time. And this is probably going to sound silly because it's probably kind of obscure now, but there was a Disney movie, Hercules, back 20 years ago, and they had two of Hades, the king of the underworld, two of his minions were the characters Pain and Panic. So I did a 2-part blog series using pain, how financial pain, whether it's the drop in the market from COVID or the drop during the trade tariff thing or the drop during just recently during the March, April during the war in Iran, cause people to pain causes people to then panic. Pain is the emotion, but panic is the response. And so I'm always looking for things like that to try to help explain where things are. And probably one of the best responses I got was I wrote a 3-part series last year on international stocks. And it had been 10, 12, 15 years since foreign stocks had outperformed US stocks, right? And people had forgotten about it. So I wrote a blog post, and one of them I used the Led Zeppelin song "Rock and Roll." It's been a long time. It's been a long, lonely, lonely time since foreign stocks have outperformed. The next week I had a 73-year-old retired school teacher come in. She and her husband came in to see me. And she looked at me and she goes, "I sang Led Zeppelin songs around my house all last week because of your blog post." And I went, perfect, right? If a Led Zeppelin song makes a 73-year-old retired school teacher want to read my blog post, I'm good, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. All right. So let's see. I always talk about mindsets and internal obstacles. We addressed some of them here, mainly on the idea of the retirement side.
Yeah.
But what other cultural references might help people get through mindset blocks?
Yeah. One is just time with investing, right? One of the puzzle pieces in the books is understanding investment cycles, understanding economic cycles and investment history. And one of the pop culture references I used was the Rolling Stone song, "Time Is on My Side," right? And if you think about it, a lot of people, there's been a lot of talk, especially lately, about gambling and prediction markets and how, it's analogous to investing. And I'm sitting there going, if you think about gambling and prediction markets, the house wins more than it loses. That's why there's giant casinos in Vegas and so forth, right? And I remind people of this, right? I think the long term, if you look at the stock market on a daily basis, it's up like 52, 53% of the time. It's down 47, 48% of the time. And people go, oh, well, it's 50-50. It's not much different than gambling. Well, the difference is at 1 year, right? It's up 75% of the time and down 25% of the time. If you go out to 5 years, it's up 88% of the time and down 12% of the time. Like, those are pretty good odds. We win and versus the house winning in those. And I think just helping people understand, one of the things Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's partner of all the years, always used to say is never unnecessarily interrupt the compounding. Just don't respond to it goes back to kind of the pain and panic. You can feel the pain. Don't let the panic be the trigger response, because then you interrupt the compounding, right? So, I think just trying to help people understand that, hey, in the last 50 years, we've been through 3 bear markets, 73, 74, the dot-com 9/11 bubble, and then the 07, 08 financial crisis, where stocks dropped 45, 50% or more. But if you stayed invested, if you stayed through the pain and you didn't let the panic drive the bad response at the wrong time, then you actually did really well over time. And it's part of what we try to do from a financial planning standpoint, especially for our clients who are retired. We really try to help them have sufficient liquidity and resiliency in their portfolios so they don't have to respond to every headline or social media thing or thing that comes across their phone. And I'll give you one quick story. So I had a client in 2022 who had to take his first required minimum distribution. And if you remember 2022, Russia invaded Ukraine and the Fed started raising interest rates dramatically because of non-transitory inflation, right? And so not only did the stock market drop 26%, but the bond market was down double digits. It was the worst, that we'd seen those two asset classes move that way, and since the late 70s, early 80s. And so I have this guy called me up in October, and he was supposed to come in and see me the first week of November. And he says to me, he goes, Jesse, I know I'm supposed to be coming in to see you in a couple of weeks, but I've got to take this first required minimum distribution, and the stock market's down, 20 some percent, the bond market's down, 15%. What do you think I should do? And I said, well, Dick, when the markets were near all-time highs last November, December, we trimmed a little bit out of your portfolio and we set that money into short-term and limited-term bonds that are earning 4 or 5%. So we have enough liquidity to cover your required minimum distributions for 22, 23, and 24. And so what I think you should do is probably turn off the TV and go play some golf or go hang out with your grandkids, right? And he goes, that sounds like a great idea, right? But you got to have the tools for being able to help people manage through those so they don't have to respond to whatever the headline du jour is, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Jesse, tell us who needs to find you and how they can find you.
Yeah, I would say anybody who is looking for a confident path to future retirement and somebody who can help them manage, to help them create the pathway for a future successful retirement and help them manage their assets to either accumulate the resources they need or to help them manage those resources to create the income they need to live the life they want in retirement. That's, I'd say probably mid-late 40s to early mid-50s is kind of ideal starting points for us. But we've helped people later than that from that standpoint. You can find us out there, impelwealth.com. You can look up the book Poponomics. Jesse Hurst, author, is out there. You can find the book Poponomics on Amazon and so forth. And I'm starting to put together the outline for book 2. I'm thinking about doing something like, I don't know if you remember the old Jimi Hendrix song, Are You Experienced, right? It's like Poponomics, Are You Experienced? Like what you learn in 40 years of being a financial advisor, right? There's certain things that, you can't tell. It's hard to give context to somebody if you're 27 years old and you've been doing this for 4 years, right? There's certain life wisdom and experience, right? Like you walked along clients during .com and 9/11 and 07, 08 and so forth, right? So we're working on it, but that's where you can find us, and we always love helping people.
Great. Thanks so much, Jesse. And you can always find me at lindagriz.com, LINDAGRIZ.com. And there's some free resources for you on the resources page. I've got one closing nugget for you. Retirement isn't a mystery game. It's more like a soundtrack. And the right plan lets you turn down the noise and turn up the confidence. Thanks so much for joining me today, Jesse.
Thank you so much. Had a great time.
Thanks so much for listening to Real Money, Real Life. Want to see what's blocking you from financial confidence or discover your money personality? Head to the resources page at lindagriz.com for our free quizzes. That's LINDAGRIZ.com/resources. If you're loving what you're learning, be sure to subscribe and leave a review. It helps more people find these conversations. This show is hosted and produced by Linda Grizely Ventures, LLC. Linda Grizely, that's me, is an investment advisor representative of Nectarine, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Linda Grizely Ventures, LLC is separate and unaffiliated with Nectarine. The views expressed on this show are those of the individuals expressing them and do not necessarily reflect the views of Linda Grizely Ventures, LLC, or Nectarine. Guests on the podcast may express opinions or discuss financial strategies that are their own and should not be considered recommendations or personalized financial advice. This podcast is provided for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only and should not be construed as personalized investment advice or a solicitation to buy or sell any securities or other products. Listeners should consult their own financial, legal, or tax professionals regarding their specific situation. Please visit hellonectarine.com and lindagriz.com for all relevant disclosures.